take a deep breath, take the higher road. That's what they always say, as if they know the way. They won't take it from me. But don't ever doubt yourself, 'cause life ain't just a dream. You make your own, so kick and scream. The people will act with a never-ending force. You never had the chance, so what you waiting for? The day has come, my friend, 'cause this is war. It's time and this is war.
From early on in the pandemic, many nurses and healthcare professionals began sounding the alarm on the medical malfeasance that was occurring in hospitals across the country. The narrative was that COVID was killing all of our patients, but this was not the case at all. These patients didn't die from a disease. They didn't die from a virus. These patients died in a hospital Holocaust, and this shamelessly corrupt system used its well-intentioned nurses to carry out their sinister plan. It is imperative that we address this issue head on and hold those responsible accountable for their actions. As a society, we owe it to ourselves and future generations not only to acknowledge these horrific crimes, but also to take proactive measures to prevent them from ever happening again. I believe that history will remember this as the greatest crime against humanity that it has ever seen. We must demand transparency, accountability, and justice for the victims whose lives were needlessly cut short. We need to stand together in solidarity with doctors and nurses who truly embody the values of compassion, empathy, and integrity. By shining a light on these dark corners of our healthcare system, we can work towards creating a safer world where trust is restored in those who dedicate their lives to healing others. You're listening to Nurses Out Loud on America Out Loud Talk Radio. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton. Before we get started today, I do want to encourage our listeners, if you have questions or comments, or perhaps you want to share your own experiences with what you're seeing on the front lines of healthcare, you can now submit those to us by sending them directly to nurses@americaoutloud.com. We will be featuring your questions and comments every Tuesday on a special Q&A episode with the nurses. We encourage all of you to engage in the battle and find your voice in this fight. But until you're able to do that, we will continue to be that voice for you. Joining me today is Ken McCarthy, a prolific author and publisher who has made significant contributions to the world of investigative journalism and healthcare literature. With an unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth, he has authored several thought-provoking books, including Fauci's First Fraud, which sheds light on the early career of Dr. Anthony Fauci, and Bank Failures, a gripping exploration of the financial industry. As a publisher, he has also played a crucial role in distributing important work such as the Nuremberg Code, which examines medical ethics, and the COVID Con series, which critically analyzes the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Ken also is one of the early pioneers of the movement to commercialize the internet in the early 1990s. Time magazine credits him with being the first person to recognize and articulate the importance of the click-through rate as a key metric for making the internet commercially viable. He was introduced to the practice of science as an undergraduate at Princeton University, where he studied psychology and neuroscience. He's currently actively involved in advancing innovations in neurology and rehabilitative medicine through his support of fundamental research. Ken's dedication to investigative journalism, his contributions to Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s book, The Real Anthony Fauci, these have solidified his reputation as a major contributor in both content and marketing. With a commitment to truth-telling and a passion for uncovering hidden truths, Ken continues to make a significant impact in the world of literature and healthcare discourse. In his latest groundbreaking book, What the Nurses Saw, Ken delves into the experiences of nurses like myself, and he offers a unique perspective from his investigation into the systematic medical murders that took place inside hospitals during the COVID panic and the nurses who fought back to save their patients. Ken, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you for your patience. Spectrum turned off my internet this morning at 9 a.m., and I'm working with a very rigged system
I'm telling you, it's always, the enemy will throw anything at us, right? When we're speaking truth, doesn't it seem like things like this often happen in this space, I feel like, but you're going to get through it. Absolutely. I have no doubt about that. But thank you. And, I want to say to you first off, Ken, thank you for giving the nurses a voice. And thank you for allowing me to share my story with you. It was truly an honor to be featured in your book.
Thanks for giving us the time, and giving us your experience and your insights.
Yeah, I think, it's so important. It's so important for us as nurses to be able to share what we went through. And still so many are really asleep at the wheel. So many inside the system are still not seeing what's happening right in front of their faces. So I think books like this are so important in getting that message out there, because maybe they feel like, something is amiss, but they think they're the only ones, or they think they're crazy. But when they hear from other nurses, they start to open up, and it hopefully inspires courage in them to speak out and share their stories as well.
Well, Kim, this is the first book on the subject of the systemic murder of patients in hospitals under cover of COVID. There have been individual books on individual cases,
Yeah.
on documentaries and some press attention to individual cases, but nobody has shown that this thing is a system and put all the evidence in a book.
Yeah. And it's so important. And I did receive my copy. I'm so excited to really sit down and dig into it. And so I'm featured in this book. And also you have some incredible nurses in here. Nicole Siratek is the founder and one of the early whistleblowers, founder of American Frontline Nurses. She is featured in here. You have my amazing friend and fellow nurse, Ashley Grogg, is featured. She's a master's prepared nurse that has taken on the VAERS project, which is providing education for nurses that don't even know how to submit a VAERS report.
It's amazing. It occurs to me that Tennessee is well represented in this book.
Absolutely. Yeah. And who else? Oh, Nurse Erin is featured in here as well. You have also Mark Bishofsky, the respiratory therapist.
We have Canada, who founded Canadian Frontline Nurses.
Yes. Kristen Nagel, right? She is in there as well. Just amazing warriors in this fight, and how you were able to get so many of these incredible nurses and healthcare workers together in one book is fantastic. So
I say this, I interviewed 8 nurses for this book. I realized I could have interviewed 80. I could have interviewed 800. What I'm finding, I'm attending a lot of medical justice calls, and these are families of killed loved ones and people that survived this. And a lot of them are nurses. A surprising number of nurses had loved ones killed in the hospitals. And some of these are veterans. And I'm realizing I did 8, I could have done 80, I could have done 800, maybe I could have done 8,000. So maybe a lot of nurses have not gotten public attention, or they've been a little reluctant to step forward, which I certainly understand given what's been done to nurses that have stepped forward. But I think there are easily hundreds of veteran nurses who could have said the same things that you and Erin and Nicole and so many other people have said. So, younger nurses or less experienced nurses, because there's never been a book that they could read, because they're only hearing this maybe piecemeal from one person at a time, maybe they don't understand the enormity of this. So I'm hoping that this book is going to shine a light on this is a system. This is not a few unfortunate things that happened. And we're trying to calculate how many people were actually killed this way. I mean, we know that I'm going to give rough numbers, that 1 million people supposedly died of COVID. But we also know that 900,000 of them died in hospitals. Yes. Now, we've all heard about the difference between dying of COVID or dying with COVID, but really until this book, other than individuals like yourself and some of the nurses, nobody has asked the question, how many died of neglect, of incompetence, and of malfeasance? We don't have an answer to that. We really don't have an answer, but we do know that there's a candidate number of 900,000. For instance, we don't know how many people were put on remdesivir. We don't know how many people died of being put on remdesivir. We don't know how many people were put on vents. We don't know how many people died of being put on vents. We know people were put on very powerful sedatives and psychoactive to restrain them. We don't know how many people died of that. So we're not talking about a few unfortunate cases here and there. We're talking about tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands. So this is a major thing that has unfortunately been overlooked. I think, everyone's back to school. I don't think people are still being forced to get injected to keep their jobs. I think most people realize the injections were nonsense and unsafe. So a lot of the big problems have seemingly been taken care of. But this is the big problem of all, because, and here's why this is so important, they are still killing people in the hospitals using these protocols as of this moment.
Absolutely. And people don't realize that this is still happening. And it's like, as you mentioned, it's like the perfect storm, right? It's the remdesivir, it's the ventilator, it's the sedatives. It's all coming together to create this perfect storm. And this is what is killing these patients, and that's one of the points that I bring up. And it's just a question I ask. I like to ask thought-provoking questions of people. Why are all of these patients why are they only dying in hospitals? Why are we not pulling bodies from homes? Why are we not pulling bodies off of the streets if we think of our homeless population where they're not getting any treatment at all? Why is it that they're only dying in the hospitals? And it's, really not difficult to come to the conclusion that it is the treatment and the neglect and the medical malfeasance that is killing these people.
And, another angle to this, Kim, is why is the American death rate from COVID so over the top?
Yes.
It doesn't even compare. I mean, maybe to UK and Australia and some of the other demented countries, but you look at normal countries, they don't have anywhere near a death rate from COVID that we have.
Right. And was it in India, I think that was, or was it Brazil? I can't remember which country it was that was using ivermectin, and they had an extremely low death rate because they were actually treating the disease.
Well, that is a really important point. India was one, and then many, many African countries. These countries are familiar with ivermectin.
Yeah.
And a little bit of trivia that people may not know is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have sent hundreds of millions, if not billions, of doses of ivermectin to Africa and the third world over the last 10 plus years. As a parasite treatment. So they knew darn well that it was for humans. They knew darn well it was pretty safe. And yet they kept silent while ivermectin was called horse paste and was being denied to patients. So that's just another wrinkle to all this.
Exactly. I mean, the fact that's when I really started questioning things, when, a medication that has been safely used for decades, in humans, safely used in humans for decades, has a higher safety profile than an aspirin or a Tylenol, was being completely demonized. And then we're seeing, I think it was the CDC or the FDA, I can't remember which of the horrific 3-letter agencies, put out the meme about you're not a horse, y'all, or whatever it was. Just so completely ridiculous and egregious, demonizing this life-saving medication. There is no telling how many people could have been saved by just doing this. And the other thing that they did during COVID, not only did they deny ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, but simple things like anti-inflammatory, they did nothing to mitigate the damage. They just sent you home and said, you come back when you can't breathe. No, they said the absurdity that ibuprofen was contraindicated in COVID-19 patients. So ridiculous.
This is so important. And I want to get into that next, but I want to say one last thing about ivermectin. Every single person that said ivermectin was horse paste was a liar, and they knew they were lying because this is a drug for humans. It's been used for decades, and its safety profile is well known. So these people were literally lying in the service of killing patients. Every news person, every doctor who did that was a liar. Now, you brought up something really important, which is very little known. Not only did they ban vitamin C, and we're talking about banning.
Yep.
If you're in the hospital as a COVID patient, in quotes, you couldn't get vitamin C, you couldn't get vitamin D, you couldn't get ivermectin, you couldn't get hydroxychloroquine. Okay, fine. But they also banned ibuprofen.
Yeah.
They also banned steroids. Now, Kim, I'm going to ask you a question. You're a nurse of many years. You know a lot of nurses. Aren't ibuprofen, isn't that the go-to for any inflammation if you want to try something simple and mild?
Yep, typically we'll use ibuprofen, or sometimes they'll use an NSAID of some kind, depending on if the ibuprofen is contraindicated for the patient. But yeah, this is something that we've used. Yeah, it's the go-to. And to hear it say, it was contraindicated in these patients made no sense to me. It was like we were just not mitigating any damage, but that's what we do when we treat viruses, right? We can't necessarily treat a virus, but we can mitigate the damage and go from there. So we're using steroids, we're using anti-inflammatories, but none of that happened. None of that happened. We just left these patients there to pretty much die.
Well, I think it even went beyond contraindicated. These substances were banned.
Yes.
And aggressively banned. And everybody, even if you're not a doctor or nurse, you know that early treatment of any disease is the ideal. And so they deliberately created a system whereby the people that were having the early stages of this disease could not get useful early treatment. And as you pointed out, it was set up so that those who were vulnerable would get as sick as possible and go to the hospital in fear of their lives, which is what people to the hospital. And I think we need to get into what happened at the hospitals. First, they would give you a COVID test. And if that test didn't work, they'd give you another one and another one. And repeated COVID until they finally came up with a positive test. Now, we all know these tests were unreliable. And that comes from the late Kerry Mullis, who actually invented the PCR technology. He said it should never be used as diagnostic because it's not reliable.
Exactly.
But anyway, they would, as soon as you had a COVID reading, you were then declared a COVID case, and then they would put you on oxygen. Now, the minute those two things happened, they then had a green light to start pushing remdesivir on people. Some people knew remdesivir was dangerous and said no. Most people didn't know. They thought it was the cure and they accepted it. Remdesivir is known to cause organ damage. And in fact, and they were telling us in the newspaper and on TV that COVID was causing organ failure. That's ridiculous. Kim, have you ever seen a respiratory disease cause organ failure in other organs in a matter of?
No,
have
never.
You ever? So many happened in these hospitals that was contrary to well-established medical principles and that were unhinged and made no sense. And the nurses came forward right away, like Nicole, like Aaron, like others, and said, look, you said, because the nurses, in the original wave, the nurses didn't know what remdesivir was. How could they? It was brand new. And they were told, this is the treatment, let's use it. Well, you just, why would you not? You have to trust what you've been told. But they saw immediately that remdesivir was causing severe injuries. And in our interview with Nicole, she talks about her fighting and saying no. She said, I am not giving this patient remdesivir. And everybody came after her, the head nurse, the physician, the administrator of the hospital. And the reason why, they were getting paid for every course of remdesivir they put somebody through. So the process was, do you have a positive COVID test? Yes. We'll put you on oxygen. Maybe what's the technical term for the nose thing?
Nasal cannula.
Cannula, right? Mm-hmm. They'd put you on the nasal cannula or the BiPAP. Now, let's talk about BiPAP. BiPAP is not the most comfortable thing in the world. It's a little scary. And what after I wrote the book from some nurses is that sometimes the flow was turned up deliberately super high to make it even less comfortable. And so it is a worrying, anxiety-provoking thing for a patient. So what did they do? They said to the patient, "Oh, are you agitated? We'll give you some, psychoactive drugs to calm you down." Exactly. And by the way, and here's how they killed people. Another way they kill people. They said, well, if you can't handle the BiPAP, then you need to be intubated and vented. Yep. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. This was the line given over and over and over to we don't know how many thousands of patients. Now, Kim, how often do people vent patients? What is it a common thing? Do you just do it at the drop of a hat? Is it like giving out an asprin? How serious it. And the book answers the question, but I'd like to hear it from you, and the audience should hear it.
Intubation like that, it should always be a last resort. Typically, it's when a patient is in respiratory distress. And here's what really I found to be the most egregious thing that I saw at the bedside after nearly 30 years in healthcare, is I am seeing them pushing for early intubation, which was not about the patient in the bed. They were doing this in an attempt to contain the virus, because once that patient is on a ventilator, it's a closed loop system. The virus is no longer being disseminated into the air. So they were doing this as a means to protect the nurses and healthcare staff, which to me was a completely egregious. We don't ever do this. This is not a simple procedure. This is a procedure that comes with a lot of risk. In fact, we knew that about 80% of the people that we were putting on these ventilators were not going to come off of it. So to put a patient on a ventilator for no other reason than to protect somebody else from a virus we'd already been exposed to. I mean, it was absolutely absurd on its face. Was the most egregious thing that I had ever seen. And we were literally signing their death warrant by doing this.
Yeah, I want to say two things about that. I don't think people are put on vents just because they have respiratory distress. They have to have major.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Not just like a little shortness of breath. I mean, you have to be like in respiratory failure, and then they're going to ventilate. That would be a better word to describe it.
Breathing happens not because of the lungs. It happens because of the diaphragm.
Correct.
And the diaphragm's a muscle. And if that muscle stops working, the air stops coming into your lungs. That's the point at which you would intubate and vent somebody. And now machines are breathing for you. And the slang word for the pipe they stick down your throat into your lungs is the garden hose. Now, it's not exactly as large as a garden hose, but it's close. To it.
Pretty close.
Then they have to put a feeding tube into your stomach. These are delicate procedures which can and do go wrong, especially, the other point, especially when they're being done by unqualified personnel. During COVID, many special floors, special room, developed parts of the hospitals were set up to be COVID only. And they recruited all kinds of people to work. Sometimes you had your regular doctors and nurses in there, but very often in many locations, you had contract nurses, and doctors. Many of these contract nurses and doctors did not have qualifications to be working in an ICU at all. They did not have qualifications to do the delicate procedure of venting patients. Some of these doctors and nurses came from foreign countries. Some of them could barely speak English. And they were basically given a list of things to do and told to do them. They were also being paid astronomical amounts of money. The New York City contract nurses were getting $10,000 a month.
A week.
A week. Yeah. $10,000 a week. That's $500,000 a year, folks. Who knows what the doctors were getting? So if you just think of the logistics, you take a doctor, and I don't want to single out any country, and then they put him on a plane, they bring him to New York. He can barely speak English. He is not an ICU doctor. He might be a podiatrist. Yep. Nicole told me this. There were podiatrists, there were
gynecologists were doing it. Yeah, absolutely.
Working in the ICUs. And then you have the rush to vent everybody. And as Kim and I've discussed, this is the last resort. When that diaphragm stops working, okay, we now have to breathe for the patient. Okay, so it's not a trivial thing. The other thing that I wanted to say about this, is the fact that it is a garden hose. And not only that, you have to be on multiple drips of extremely powerful drugs, including fentanyl. They need a drug they need a drug or complex of drugs to paralyze your body so you don't move and thrash around. They need a complex of drugs to provide painkillers because this is obviously a very painful procedure. They need a complex of drugs to keep you under. This is very close to being under anesthesia. So not only is it difficult to do this procedure, you then need a very qualified, very experienced nurse and or respiratory therapist or pulmonologist to monitor you while you're on these machines. Yeah. Folks were not monitored properly. We even have cases where the drips were kept in the hallway, and with long hoses or long tubes going into the patient, and the drugs were changed without anybody ever looking at the patient to see if they were getting better, getting worse. And in some cases, these patients were dead. Yeah, and nobody even knew it. So this was absolute mayhem. And it was not one-off. and it was a system. It was a system that was written down, and everybody got what the rules were. And here's the other key: the rules that led to all these people dying were enforced brutally. If you said anything, you were moved out of the ICU. If you continued to talk, you were fired. If you continued to talk, you had your license taken. And in Nicole and other people's cases, if you continued to talk, you had troll armies that were set upon you to threaten you with violence, threaten your children, threaten your family. And one group, and we document this a lot in the book because it's so important, UN supported, is called Team Halo. And when I say UN supported, we have the video on the website for the book that shows the head of communications for the UN bragging about their work with Team Halo. Team Halo gave out the address of Nicole Sorotek, the physical home address, and she had people showing up at her door threatening her.
Yeah, Nicole's been through a lot. God bless her for speaking out, and she has taken the brunt of these, like Team Halo and all of these just horrible people. So, God bless Nicole for everything she has done for this fight, because she's really been through a lot.
And I dedicated the book to all the nurses, but I named Nicole especially because, as far as I know, she was the first. She was the first to make it into public business. But notice, nurses like Erin and Nicole were on YouTube in May, and there was a little bit of a publicity blip about that, and then they disappeared, and nobody ever heard from them again. Yeah. Not that they weren't trying. They were censored, they were ignored, and in the case of Nicole, they were threatened and treated very, very badly. So this is some really dark stuff, and I want to tell you who this book is for. This book is for everybody, because you may have a loved one because the system is still in place. Yes. They're not killing in absolute terms, they're not killing as many people as they were back in 2020, 2021, 2022, because there's less COVID cases. But if a loved one goes into a hospital and gets COVID diagnosed and gets on oxygen and gets on these sedatives, they are on an assembly line to death.
Yes.
Right now. I'm on these medical justice calls, and they are telling me people are being killed this way right now. All right. So this is not some ancient history that, thank God, that's over. It ain't over. But even more concerning is the system that they have set up. Declare a disease, declare a protocol, enforce it brutally, have nurses and doctors that are willing to go along with it, has not been exposed to the public. Right. They can turn this on with another disease for the entire public again, anytime they want. And what this was, as far as I can see, from a systems point of view, this was a way to kill the hundreds of thousands of people in the dark and keep the public dark about it. I mean, we know what's happening in Palestine right now because it's on TV every day. Nobody knows. And by the way, 10,000 civilians killed every month in Palestine. They were killing that many people or more in U.S. hospitals with these protocols. Absolutely. But it was all dark. Nobody knew. Nobody still knows. So that's why I'm glad I'm on this show.
Yeah, I think it's so important. That's why this book is just an incredible tool to get this in the hands of more nurses who, like you said, younger nurses who may not even have that full understanding yet about what is happening, but maybe they have that, little sense of something is not right here. And they have the opportunity to read from other nurses who have worked through COVID, because still I see in nursing groups all the time on the internet, I see that they are still so asleep at the wheel, and they truly believe COVID killed all of their patients, and they're getting their 5th, 6th, and 7th booster. And I pray for them, because that's a whole other story when we get into the vaccines and what those have done. But I know, Ken, that you are short on time today. So I thank you so much for being here.
I'm going to keep going. A few more.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned something about multiple boosters. AARP, the American Association of Retired people, is one of the biggest publishers in the United States. I think they just count all the people over 65 or 62, and you automatically get that magazine if you're that age and are a member of that group, and many, many people are. In this issue that just came out, there was a question, oh, dear doctor, I've gotten all the 5 boosters. Should I get the next one? And the doctor's saying, oh, absolutely. Go right ahead. You need that next one. So yeah, the vaccination thing is a whole nother issue. I do believe, and I was saying this in 2020, they were using the terror to terrorize people into accepting the vaccine that was on its way. They were terrorizing people and preparing people to feel desperate and to feel that the vaccine was going to save them and then it was going to be a relief. And of course, we know that the vaccine was not safe. We know that just by looking at VAERS, and we know that it was not effective, and that's the admission of everybody at this point. And yet they're still pushing it. I want to say something that's I think so important for young nurses or nurses that are new to the profession. There are groups you can talk to. Yeah. One of them is nursefreedomnetwork.org. Another one, of course, is our friends at American Frontline Nurses. If you're a Canadian nurse, it's CanadianFrontlineNurses.org. Start there if you're a nurse. And boy, I have all sympathy for nurses. You've gone through school. You had hopes and dreams. Yeah. You went to school, which is not easy. People don't know that nursing degree is not an easy degree to get.
Oh no, not at all.
It is really hard. So, they've gone through all this, the younger nurses, and the ones that are just new to the profession because they've come from somewhere else. You go through all this, you have the highest hopes, and now you find yourself in this situation. And I can't say that it's going to be easy to look at this material, but I think for the sake of your soul, yeah. You do need to look at it and get with one of these groups. Kim's got a great one. And talk with other nurses and get, band together. One of the things that I wanted to highlight in the book is that nurses are our last line of defense at this point. I'm just going to say it. There are a few hero doctors, but the the MD profession has pretty much as a whole gone along with this or kept silent. Yeah. It is the nurses by far overwhelmingly that have come together, put it on the line, and organized groups. Now, that's a wonderful thing, and being part of that would be a wonderful thing. Functionally, nurses are required to protect their patients. They're required to act as advocates. They're required to point out mistakes. They're required to point out malfeasance. Now, that doesn't mean that if you do that, you're going to be celebrated in the hospital. You will probably, bad things will happen to you. I'm sorry to say. But you need to know what you're involved in. And you're going to have to make a decision as to how to go forward. And one of the things I love is that a lot of trained nurses are saying, you know what, I'm going to take all this knowledge and information I have, and I'm going to provide it directly to the public. Now, nurses can't do everything. You can't do open heart surgery. And, if you need something like that, well, you absolutely need to go to a medical facility. But there are so many things that people can treat with the help of a nurse. And that is one way to use your nurse's training rather than be part of this killing machine. Now, I'm not saying every wing of the hospital is a killing machine, but clearly these COVID wards, many of them are functioning that way and still functioning that way.
Absolutely. And that's, why we're pushing forward with remnant nursing and trying to have that platform and give nurses an opportunity to come out of the system and realize there is a better way to care for our patients. We're up against a break. We're going to go to break and come right back, and we'll finish up this incredible conversation. America Out Loud Talk Radio plays on the iHeartRadio network. You can also listen on our media player from any web browser anywhere in the world. We have the best in-class apps available on Apple, Android, or Alexa 24/7. Great talk radio. All of our shows go to podcast the following day. You can hear them on apps such as Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, iHeart Podcast, and many more. Be sure to subscribe and rate the show on Apple Podcasts for me. Don't forget to check out our online store at americaoutloud.shop, where you can find all of the products that we represent on our network at a discounted rate, including ASEA Redox, which I can personally speak to seeing fantastic results with, including better sleep, increased energy, improved mood, and a decrease in my joint pain. Use promo code OUTLOUD to save 15% off your purchase. I'll catch you on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
It's time and this is war.
Nurses Out Loud Talk Radio want to introduce you to ASEA Redox cell signaling molecules. It is more than just a wonderful natural product. Redox molecules are native to the human body. Redox molecules enable your body to turn on its inner doctor so your body can heal itself the way it did naturally when you were young. Check out americaoutloud.shop, look for ASEA Cell Signaling Molecules Liquid Supplement, and check out Nurse Michelle's recent favorite ASEA product, Renew 28 Revitalizing Redox Gel, because this gel helped get me through some significant muscular pain during my healing process following a recent canoeing accident when I broke my hip. Give it a try for your aches and pains, and let Nurses Out Loud hear how your health has improved.
World-class care from doctors you can trust, all from the comfort of your home. That is One Wellness. Dr. Peter McCullough and his team at The Wellness Company launched the One Wellness membership to provide free monthly supplements and unlimited telemedicine access with doctors that share your values. Be a part of a revolutionary new healthcare system that puts your health and well-being above the interests of Big Pharma's bottom line. It's the way healthcare should be. Go to OutLoudCare.com today and use code OUTLOUD for 25% off your first month of One Wellness.
How can you improve your odds of staying healthy? The answer is stay healthy with Cofix RX. Who's got time for a cold, strep, a flu, HRV, RSV, or COVID anyhow? Cofix has some great news. Besides being featured as a top 5 product in the drugstore news, we completed the protocol that you've heard Dr. McCullough talk about. Cofix RX is already famous for a powerful virus-hostile nasal solution, and now we have a throat spray too. Crush those nasty germs before they become a problem. With known antiviral support ingredients like povidone iodine, xylitol, and vitamin D3, you can feel a little safer. For a limited time, when you add the new Cofix RX throat spray to your order, you'll receive 25% off the entire purchase. Just click the Cofix RX banner on the America Out Loud website or store. Be sure to use promo code OUTLOUD25 at checkout. Don't forget OUTLOUD25 at checkout.
These days, every time you turn on the news, it seems like there's a new threat to your health. Maintaining a strong immune system has never been more critical. Advanced nutrition company Healthy Cell created Immune Super Boost to help you strengthen your immunity. Unlike other supplements that don't work, Immune Super Boost is not a pill. It's a gel you swallow with ultra absorption of science-backed nutrients proven to support immunity, like vitamin C, D3, zinc, elderberry, and echinacea. These physician-formulated gels come in a small gel pack. Tear off the top and shoot it down, or mix it in water. Boost your immunity. Go to healthycell.com and use limited time code OUTLOUD for 25% off your first order. Risk-free. Love it or your money back. Guaranteed. Healthycell.com, code OUTLOUD. Healthycell.com, code OUTLOUD.
Lean, pure, with premium ingredients. Global Healing's Pure Plant Protein offers 20 grams of protein per scoop, and it's the perfect way to maintain and build lean muscle while indulging yourself. It combines enzymes and probiotics to maximize nutrient absorption, improving digestion and your gut health. Available in vanilla and chocolate flavors, elevate your protein consumption while supporting your overall wellness with Pure Plant Protein. Go to americaoutloud.shop and get 15% off using the code OUTLOUD. Global Healing, giving you the power to take control of your health naturally.
AmericaOutloud.news is beaten to the pulse of our nation. We know when you're angry, troubled, misled, joyful, and thankful. We know you because we are you. Join us as we explore the most important issues of our time. America Out Loud Talk Radio. It's a fight for the soul of humanity.
Welcome back to Nurses Out Loud on America Out Loud Talk Radio. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton. Wherever you're listening from today and whatever you're doing, I thank you for giving me the gift of your time. Be sure to make AmericaOutloud.news your daily stop for all the latest news and happenings. We all must do our part and share the stories, the articles, the podcasts, and videos so we can help secure America's future. If you're just joining us, I've been talking with author and publisher Ken McCarthy, author of the new groundbreaking book, What the Nurses Saw. Ken, thanks so much for being here.
Again, thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. And we talked a lot about in the first half of the show about what exactly is going on in the hospitals, what the nurses are seeing. But I really want to touch on, how can the nurses get this book, or really everybody? This is not just for nurses. This is for everybody. It's our loved ones, ourselves, that are going to be at risk going into these hospital systems. You have to be armed and prepared when you go in. That's why advocates are so important. So how can the public find your book?
Well, you made a really good point there. I bet we have people on this call who had loved ones killed in a hospital under cover of COVID.
Yeah.
Some of them may realize it. Some of them may only have suspicion. This book would be an important thing for them to get to understand what happened. I'd also say every person needs this book because you or a loved one may find yourself in a hospital being treated with the COVID protocols, and you need to know what these guys are up to. So there's two ways to find out about this book. One, we have a website called whatthenursessaw.com, and we have lots and lots of information from the book right there. And then you can also go to Amazon. We're using Amazon for distribution because they make it easier. Also, I'm sorry to say our independent booksellers in America have really betrayed us. I was going to say let us down, but they've actively betrayed us. I was very active in promoting the Robert F. Kennedy book, The Real Anthony Fauci. I could not get an independent bookstore in my region, and that's a 5-county region, to carry the book.
Wow.
Some of them would not even order it for their clients. So that's why we're using Amazon. That's where you can get the book. I've kept the price literally as low as I can. This is a significant book. It's nearly 500 pages, but don't be intimidated by that. It's interviews, and then it's appendix material where you can learn what remdesivir is, what the history of remdesivir is. You can learn what venting means. You can read the Nuremberg Code. You can read the Nurses Code. We've got quite a bit of material supplementary, but also the interviews are very interesting. These nurses were and are heroic. These are great, inspiring stories. So go to whatthenursessaw.com or go to Amazon. And the other thing is, please, please, please tell people, because we are not going to get a lot of publicity for this book. And if people don't tell people, no one's going to know this. And last thing I want to say, this is currently the only book that describes the system of medical murders that's taking place under cover of COVID. There have been individual stories, and they're all good and they're all important, but this shows the enormity of it. And right now it's the only book there is.
Right. And that's why it's so important, as we said, that we get this book in the hands. And not only that, I will say, we talked a little bit about trolls, and there will be people that will come on and give negative reviews to this book who have not even had the book in their hands, read the book. They will put negative reviews out there. So it's important, if you get the book, if you read the book, if you found this book to be useful, please go and give a positive review for this book, because we do have to combat a lot of trolls, unfortunately, and a lot of Lord, the words, I'm telling you.
Well, let me tell you the story. So the minute we put the book on Amazon, there was an instant 1-star, which is the lowest rating, troll post instantly. Yeah. And then our readers who actually read the book and had positive things to say about it, many of them have written to me telling me that their positive reviews still haven't been posted. Numerically, we need five-star. We need 3 5-star reviews to neutralize every 1-star review.
Yeah.
And yeah, believe me, once the trolls realize that this book is out there, they will be mobilized, and there will be 10,000, 1-star reviews of this book. So yes, if you believe in this, and if you've had a chance to look at the book, or if you understand that I actually know what I'm talking about here, you might want to go to Amazon and support the book right now.
Absolutely. And I did share it with my followers, and many of them have purchased the book. And I know that they are excited to read it and to hear about what's actually been going on. And like you said earlier, many people have lost loved ones in these hospitals, and a lot of them have been suspicious. And this really does confirm, their initial thoughts. And it's a good thing, because many people have to just think they're paranoid or think that they're crazy. And to be able to have this type of validation will be very important to many, many people.
Great. Well, again, Kim, thank you so much for having me on your show. And thank you for being willing to talk and be someone that I could interview for the book.
Absolutely. We appreciate you, Ken. Again, I'm so grateful for Ken McCarthy for joining me for the episode today, and for giving the nurses a platform in order to share our stories. I think, many of you who are familiar with my story know that it's been a challenge to get our message out there. The censorship has been real. I'm grateful for the platform here on America Out Loud that allows me to speak to all of you and to share my truth and the truth of so many others who have been through this pandemic, who saw what was happening firsthand in the hospitals. And as I mentioned earlier, I worked in the ICU throughout the entire pandemic. So I had seen firsthand how devastating the effects of COVID could be, particularly when doctors were doing absolutely nothing to treat it except to tell patients to just go home and come back when they couldn't breathe. That was something I'll never forget. This is not something, and we alluded to this earlier in the episode, this is not something that we've ever done before. We never just threw our hands up and acted like there was nothing in the world that we could do. We would always mitigate the damage, but that wasn't happening here. It was just go home, don't take any Tylenol, don't take any ibuprofen, don't take any vitamins, just go home, get worse, and then come back. And come back when you're a prime candidate to be put on a ventilator. The hospitals are scary places right now. So I don't encourage COVID testing at all, because you're going to have a bounty on your head at this point, right? You have a bounty on your head, this financial incentivization that goes along with that. And it's just a dangerous place right now. And that's why it's so important. And I try to really stress this, that it is so important to have an advocacy plan in place. Nobody thinks that they need an advocate until they do. It's best to plan ahead. You never plan on getting sick and having to go to a hospital, but unfortunately, sometimes that does happen, even as healthy as you are. We did an episode here recently with one of our nurses that works at Remnant. And, she talked about, she's a very, very healthy individual. She's not vaccinated. And she ended up in the hospital with polymorphic VTAC, in a life-threatening situation. And she wouldn't have expected that. Again, she's a very, very healthy woman. She's a nurse. She takes very good care of herself, but nonetheless, she ended up in the hospital having to advocate for herself. And even as a nurse, it can be difficult to advocate for yourself. So we do want to impart on everybody the importance, and whether that be through my organization at Remnant Nursing or another organization, there are others out there. Just make sure that you have an advocacy plan in place. Again, the value in that, I can't stress it enough. Having watched so many of my patients' lives cut needlessly short because they didn't have that type of advocacy. We took their advocates away from them. Their family wasn't allowed in. Many of the nurses were afraid to ask questions. Many of the nurses were afraid to stand up and fight back, which is unfortunate. I think, again, and I've said this many times, I feel like that as nurses, we could have collectively done more to stop this. But, it is what it is. And this is where we are now. So we have to make sure that moving forward, we never allow this to happen again. I do believe this is one of the greatest crimes against humanity, if not the greatest crimes against humanity that we'll ever see. And we have to ensure that this never happens again. As an ICU nurse, I do understand the enormous responsibility that comes with being a patient's last line of defense. And that's why I always have, and I always will, I will continue asking questions. I will continue advocating for anyone who's in my care. I mean, I had to leave the bedside, and it broke my heart to do it. This was a career that I loved. I loved being a bedside nurse. And this is, again, all I've ever wanted to do since I'm 2 years old. And I didn't go back to school until later in life. I've been in healthcare for nearly 30 years, but I did not go back for my RN until I was 35. And it took me a while to get it. I was working full time. And so I worked incredibly hard and incredibly long to finally chase down that lifelong dream. So when I'm sitting here telling you that I walked away from all of this, I don't say that lightly. This was not an easy decision for me to make. To give all of that up, to burn my career to the ground. Nobody will hire me at this point. And not that I want to go back. I have no desire to go back into this broken system. My hope and my prayer is that we are able to continue to forge ahead with what we're doing with remnant nursing and contributing to shifting the paradigm and building a parallel healthcare system for all. But understanding that not everybody's able to leave the system. And honestly, we don't want everybody to leave the system because there are going to be patients that can't. So we do want those good nurses to be in there, but they do have to be questioning, they do have to be advocating, and they do have to be ensuring that informed consent is happening. And that's very difficult to do when you're a part of that system, unfortunately. But I want to encourage all of the nurses that are still out there. There's a better way. There's a better way. We are doing everything that we can to create this path for you to be able to come out of this system, because there is a better way where we can provide more meaningful care for our patients that focuses on keeping them well, right? It was so depressing to me as an ICU nurse to watch all of my patients come in, even pre-COVID, to watch them come in just so sick. And all we were ever doing was managing their symptoms. We weren't doing anything to get them well. It is a complete and total sick care system, but we can do better. I know my sister and brother nurses out there. I know that you are with me when I say, and we can do better. That's exactly what we're doing with Remnant Nursing. So I would encourage you to visit our website at remnantnursing.org and see what we're all about, see what our values and our mission is. And if it aligns with your values and your mission, then let's set up a call and talk, and let's see if you are a good fit for the Remnant team. You don't have to do what I did. You don't have to drop everything and leave and start this whole new system. We're doing it for you. So, you can kind of dip your toes in and see if it's a good fit for you. And then once you start to build your own practice, once you start to build your client base and understand that you can provide care, again, in a meaningful way, and that you're actually getting people well, there'll be no reason for you to want to stay in this broken and oppressive sick care system any longer. So I would encourage you, again, visit the website and see what we're all about. Again, you want to get the book. It is called What the Nurses Saw. Author is Ken McCarthy. I will have the link to purchase this in the show notes. And again, it's an incredible compilation of interviews as an appendix of great resources. Let me just tell you exactly who is featured in this book. It's myself, of course. Nurse Erin Olszewski was in here. Nicole Siratek, founder of American Frontline Nurses. Ashley Grogg from the VAERS Project is featured as well. Respiratory therapist Mark Bashofsky. Kristen Nagel, who is the founder of Canadian Frontline Nurses, AJ DePriest of the Adam Group and Tennessee Liberty Network. And she's also a wonderful, great personal friend of mine. Absolute warrior in this fight. The data that she has, and we're going to have her on the show here soon as well, but the data that she has is so compelling. So please do get the book, What the Nurses Saw. Again, I will put the link in the show notes for all of you. And again, thank you to Ken McCarthy for joining me today, for talking about the book, and for giving the nurses this incredible platform. I can't tell you what it means to me personally, and I know to my sister nurses who have been out here struggling. So again, we want to dedicate this episode to all of the nurses who spoke out when they had so much to lose, but that spoke out and stood in the gap for their patients. You're on the right side of history, and I am proud to stand in this fight with each and every one of you. And that's all the time that we have for today, friends. But remember, we are here on the air 5 days a week, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. You can also catch the encore at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please be sure to tune in and listen to myself and my amazing sister nurses. As we walk you through all of these hot topics, we will empower you with information and education. We will advocate and we will stand in the gap for you, because we are nurses and this is what we do. Again, I'm your nurse. I'll be your nurse. I'm your host, Nurse Kimberly Overton, and you can find me here every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. Until next time, be safe, be well, and God bless. And remember that we are in a war for truth. We are putting out a bounty on the real misinformation and exposing the purveyors of propaganda. No topic is off limits as we shine our lights and expose the darkness.
It's time and